Okay, everyone. So there are still people joining us, but we will go ahead and get started. Again, thank you from the North Carolina Black Alliance. We are a 501c3 organization that is committed to building independent Black political power in the state of North Carolina. And we have been, for the past month or so, hosting a series of trainings that are focused around the redistricting process, helping our community understand what redistricting is, why it's important, and then we're moving toward helping people to kind of build a strategy around particularly the local redistricting process. And so we are grateful to have all of you join us today. We are very excited for our presentation today and all of our panelists. And to kick us off on that, I'm actually going to turn the attention now to one of my colleagues with North Carolina Black Alliance, attorney Yolanda Taylor. And so Yolanda, I'm going to spotlight you now, and you feel free to begin speaking and present whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. Again, on behalf of the North Carolina Black Alliance, I thank you for being a part of this continuation of our series on co-ed redistricting. At this time, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce to you our panelists for today. I'm going to start with Susan Perry-Cole. Susan Perry-Cole is a community leader. She's a national organizer and the CEO president of the North Carolina Association of CDCs, which is a statewide organization whose mission is to ensure economic opportunity, fairness, and opportunity for all. The CDC accomplishes this mission through programs that include, for example, a grassroots group of engaged citizens called the Community Academy. This group advocates for health equity in food and housing. It collaborates with the City of Rocky Mount to create equitable policies that will ensure equitable economic development and fair housing opportunity within Rocky Mount's growth strategy. Ms. Susan Perry-Cole sits on the board of several committees, and she's an honoree of the 2019 Defenders of Justice Award given to her by the NC Justice Center for her years of work dedicated towards economic justice and opportunity for all. In 2020, she was also awarded with the Citizen Planners Award by the American Planning Association for her work on a land use study in Rocky Mount called the Atlantic Arlington Corridor Study. Our second panelist is Angela Bryant. She's a former state legislator. She's a diversity and inclusion strategist and a community organizer in her own right. For 3 years, Angela held a seat on the City Council of Rocky Mount, where she also briefly acted as mayor pro temp. In 2007, Angela was appointed to the State House, where she served 3 terms before being appointed to the State Senate there. She has fought for affirmative action, equal rights, and community-based economic development. She has earned many honors, including the Frederick Douglass Leadership Award and the Conservation Voters and Sustainable Energy Association's Legislator of the Year Award. She also has sat on many distinguished boards, including serving as a board of trustee for the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And one of my most favorite facts about Angela is that she was a charter member of the North Carolina Association of the Women Attorneys, an organization that I personally hold dear, and she later served as that association's president. My third panelist for today is Erin Dale Bird. She's the executive director of the Partnership and Partnership Action Fund. She's a mother, literally and figuratively. She's a mother around many community movements. She's a community activist. She's a political strategist and a culture worker in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's the former executive director of Blueprint North Carolina, which is a collaborative of 48 progressive organizations, as we know, that are working for a fairer, more just North Carolina. She has over 13 years of experience in successful coalition work on campaigns, so many, but to name a few: minimum wage, public financing of judicial campaigns, and same-day voter registration. She is her most proud accomplishment, I should say, is being a mother of 2 Prince Kings. But she has been awarded with various awards as well: Ella Baker Award from Youth Organizer Institute, Women to Watch from Women Advance, Sisters Award from the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, and she has a degree in sociology from the College of William and Mary. And we're so honored to have these 3 dynamic women today on our panelists. Okay, so I hope you guys are ready for a very engaging discussion today so that you can understand more clearly how redistricting actually works on the local level, and that you can have some great nuggets and some takeaways to now turn around and use in your own communities. So we're going to begin that panel. And let's start with Erin.
Can you hear me and see me well? All right, great, thank you. Reggie, I sent you that PowerPoint, and if you're able to get it up, that'd be great. And if you can't, I'm just gonna sort of talk from some of the notes I have. First, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to share any reflections with the members of the Alliance, the elected officials, the community activists and organizers, just all of you really committed to supporting and advancing the liberation of Black people in our state. I just thank you for your commitment to that really hard work. I live in Raleigh. I moved to North Carolina 20 years ago, actually, and have been organizing about that long. I'm a member of Black Workers for Justice. That was one of the first organizations I joined, and I would identify that as sort of one of the organizations that trained me in my sort of organizing philosophy. I worked at Blueprint for 12 years. That was fantastic, very difficult work, very challenging. And now I'm at the Partnership Funds, which is a foundation focused on building independent political power in 11 states, of which North Carolina is one of those. I'm also, I think the proudest thing that I'm engaged in is in Raleigh trying to build Fertile Ground Food Cooperative. I'm the president. We have about 700 owners, and we're working to build a community-owned grocery store and cultural center. We really want to advance what we call a solidarity economy that's rooted in centers Black joy and celebration and brilliance in our community, and builds belonging and a place where workers, shoppers, farmers, producers can together. And that is generally how most people feel, especially the dominant culture about that kind of vision. It's like, rah, 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 right? But I say to you, man, it's so important that our people own our organizations and their assets, and are able to build sort of cooperative and collective governance, which really is kind of the basis of redistricting. And the whole strategy or concept of redistricting happens every 10 years. I think folks got basics, so I'm gonna just name a couple of things, right? It happens every 10 years. And the policy and the lines that are set in the redistricting fight really have an impact for the next decade. I'd argue sometimes beyond the decade, because during the decade, you're building this foundation, right, that leads to the other great impact. You're building that infrastructure. So redistricting in many ways challenges our ability from the ground to build up powerful movement-based organizations. You can stop right here. This is the image we use at the Partnership Funds, from this waning paradigm to new paradigm. And we talk about like leaving racism, white supremacy, and colonized culture behind, and try to figure out how to build organizations that are liberatory, joyous, and equitable, and center our dignity and our full humanity and our wholeness. And that is also, I think, a really valuable concept in redistricting, how the lines drawn help keep the community whole. Could you go to the next slide for me? Okay. These are two examples of gerrymanders, and I want to just highlight them historically because I think they build a strong foundation. The first one, the Zeb's Black Baby, the Vance County, North Carolina there, was essentially where the Zeb's Black Baby, where in Vance County in 1881, the Republican, Blacks were voting solidly Republican at that time. And so the Democrats, which were, switched kind of from now, right? The Democrats then supporting slavery, advancing slavery, they wanted to create this district. So they cut out Vance from the 3 counties you see surrounding it. And that district became Zeb's Black Baby, really sort of disempowering, kind of what we would call in this, packing these folks, drawing this district around these folks of Black folks here to basically reduce their power across all these districts. So one of the first gerrymanders in North Carolina here. And then this also, over here on the left, you see this book. These are just references. How Redistricting Has Protected Slavery, White Supremacy, and Partisan Minorities in Virginia by Brent Tortor. And it talks about how redistricting as a strategy has always been used to advance white supremacy. In this case, you have forces that are fighting against one another, and drawing the lines enables some to have more power over in one district over other districts. I think one of the examples I think about is how if you have 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats and everybody votes 50-50, but the districts actually end up with 13 Republican congressmen, your districts are drawn in a way that are disempowering communities of color or Black communities in particular, and done in many ways to maintain those majorities that are inequitable. And so part of what the work that, you could go to the next slide because there's one more slide of A&T in here. This one is another example of sort of a cracking, right? Where the district was drawn right down the middle of A&T, and many of you all remember that, kind of breaking up the power of students at A&T historically have led so many movements for change in our state. And during this time, if I remember, there was also a big fight around sort of public funding from HBCUs, and so many of us felt like these attacks sometimes even come after victories or wins, or come to prevent victories or wins. So one of the things that I was asked to do was just kind of lay out a few of the stories of redistricting and just talk a little bit about it in terms of the issue-based campaigns or the work. What I will say is that redistricting obviously follows the decennial census. And in 2010, the first census and redistricting strategy that I was involved in really did not have a lot of resources for community organizations to be able to educate folks about the process, because that does take money and training and resourcing of expertise. Can you go to the next slide for me? Next one. Okay, yeah, just leave right there. And so when I started that work at Blueprint, then we really struggled to be able to advocate for the census and even get an adequate census count, and struggled then through that redistricting session. And this time around, where there's a lot more energy and involvement in education and engagement at the community level, which is, I think, beautiful and which warms my heart. And wanted to just raise up a couple of values in our organizing fights around redistricting, because there's a lot of different ways, I think, for different states across the country to move redistricting work, whether they have a commission or whether their represented elected body determines, or whether you do a lot of organizing at the local level and you're able to have a ballot initiative in your state. There are a lot of different ways that groups across the country right now are advocating for redistricting. But there are a couple of key values that I thought I would just name that are helpful, and then I hope Sister Angela Bryant and Sister Sue Perry-Cole can build off of, which include, like, first, this idea of equity, meaning that people have access to the information about where the lines are drawn or what the decisions are about the lines, but also equitably resourced across the state in rural communities and Black communities, in urban communities, et cetera, to build in the organizations a lot of awareness about what the process is, how the process moves, and even train people in their own communities to connect to their own things that are important to them, and build their redistricting strategy around their community of interest or around their local municipality, or however they like to do that, to be able to protect their interests, but really work with people to understand, so that the person at the shopping center, as well as someone at the legislature, that both of them are able to, or at least able to have some access. And so we talked a lot about equitable resourcing of community groups, so that they have the money and the time and the staffing and the expertise to share with folks about redistricting, like's happening tonight, actually. The other thing was really supporting access and engagement, which was pressing, like, for a lot of community forums, so a strategy that presses for as much public input and public access as possible. There were earlier proposals for reforms that had little, if no, public input opportunity, meaning no public forum set by the legislator or by the policy itself. And we would really find those to be inequitable and not really transparent, and preventing folks from everyday communities from participating in this redistricting process and learning about it. And then I just want to offer accountability too, which was really thinking about who is making the decisions on the lines and who those individuals are accountable to, and how to ensure that accountability in our organizing strategy. So if it is an advisory board that isn't elected, how are those individuals being held accountable to an agenda that improves the redistricting process for everyone equitably? And then the last would be culture, which is really like organizing strategies that engage folks around music, around art. There's some videos I share with Reggie, he might be able to share later, and some different images that show that like engage the community of in redistricting in new ways, because a lot of people find even the conversation about redistricting to be they disinterested. When you say redistricting, a lot of the research shows that people disconnect or feel like that it's a nasty issue, that gerrymandering, it's, you know, they're taking over power, or they're deciding, legislators are deciding, they have this kind of negative feeling about redistricting. And they're even encouraging things like say fair district instead of redistricting, and have language around that so as not to use a frame that doesn't encourage people to participate. So as we like do this walk around, engaging people in the process, I think it's one of the most important processes as a community engagement strategy. And I'm really interested in supporting people and figuring out how they do that, and working with folks that are interested. And I also forwarded some resources to Reggie that he'll be able to distribute that have data sources, images, videos, talking points, things that you can use online for social media. And I hope that those things will be helpful for the folks as they're building their community engagement strategy. Thank you, Yolanda, for the opportunity to share with folks.
Thank you, Erin. And at this time, we will move on to hear from our other two panelists. And I believe that they're going to collaborate to a certain extent in their presentations. So let's start with Ms. Sue Perry Cole.
This character home really felt dark and dated, like given all the woodwork sort of thing.
Sue, I'm sorry, you might be muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I've been talking to myself, haven't I?
Sorry.
I was saying thank you for the opportunity to participate on this panel with several of my close friends and colleagues, each of whom I consider to be a dedicated freedom fighter. For the time given to me tonight, I want to briefly highlight several themes. First, I want to provide a few quick facts about Rocky Mount, the city which is the focus of my remarks tonight. This will include brief reference to the political context that existed in 1983 when a federal lawsuit was brought by Legal Aid of North Carolina, which was filed under the Voting Rights Act, challenging the method of electing members of the Rocky Mount City Council. Then I want to honor and respect the long history of community-based political resistance that has been established in Rocky Mount by discussing a milestone event, the 1978 Rocky Mount sanitation workers strike that advanced the struggle for political power in Rocky Mount. And then I'll conclude by fast forwarding to the present and highlighting a critical policy issue facing impoverished and disinvested communities of color in Rocky Mount today, and the role a redistrict municipal government is playing in addressing this challenge. I do want to acknowledge my reliance on a research paper authored by James Wren, which documents the 1978 Rocky Mount sanitation workers strike. He, like Erin, is a member of Black Workers for Justice. I'm just going to highlight a few facts about Rocky Mount. For those of you who don't know, it's located 57 miles east of the capital city of Raleigh. The city straddles Nash and Edgecombe counties, and its population in 2017, total population was 55,373. Black population, 34,843. So yes, it's a predominantly Black city. White population, 15,932. Hispanics, 2,193. And below poverty level in 2017 in the city of Rocky Mount was 22.4%. And I'll end with this fact. In 2021, the most common housing problem in the city was cost burden, meaning spending over 30% of household income on housing costs. 15.2% of Rocky Mount households are cost burdened, and 13.6% of households are severely cost burdened, which means they spend more than 50% of household income on housing costs. Now I'm going to roll back time back to 1983 and let you know that Rocky Mount's municipal government was structured as a 7-member city council, which was elected by voters along with a mayor who presides over the council. Prior to the 1983 voting rights lawsuit, Rocky Mount's system for selecting members of the city council consisted of a ward residency requirement for each candidate, coupled with citywide at-large voting by the citizens of the city as a whole. Obviously, the cost of overcoming racially polarized voting patterns in the city was a problem, and so was also paying the cost of running a citywide contest. Check this out. Historically, various Black candidates ran unsuccessful campaigns for the city council, but only one of these was ever successful, and that was Reverend George Dudley, formerly head of Rocky Mount's Voters and Improvement League, who served as a Rocky Mount City Councilman from 1972 to 83. He was the first African American to serve on the council in 70 years. In 1983, when the federal court struck down as racially discriminatory Rocky Mount's at-large city council electoral methods, a 7-member ward system was created, with each city council candidate required to satisfy a ward residency requirement, with voting limited to the residents of each individual ward. At that time, we were only able to get 3 wards configured as safe, where Black residents constituted a sufficient share of the electorate so that they could be expected to cast their ballots and select the candidates of their choice. 1 ward was configured as a swing ward, where mobilized Black voters could conceivably swing the balance of power in their favor. And Angela will discuss this in more detail in a few minutes. So from 1983 all the way up to 2004, it took until 2004 for Rocky Mount voters to be able to elect a Black majority on the city council. Now let me turn my attention to the 78 sanitation workers strike. People in our area remember the sanitation workers strike of 1978 as Rocky Mount's civil rights moment. The strike sparked a movement for fundamental change in Rocky Mount. The strike broke new ground, linking labor rights with the struggle for Black power. The event demonstrated the collective power of African American self-determination and gave rise to a new generation of activists who fought for and won majority rule at the local government level. I find it astonishing to think about a courageous example of a group of striking Black sanitation workers, fortified by their community supporters, who were able to secure victory in a labor grievance. That event inspired confidence and fueled momentum for continued resistance to the then ruling white power structure. Here's just a few facts about the sanitation workers strike. In June of 1978, an upper-class white family accused Alexander Evans of stealing a suit of clothes left by the trash can in the course of his daily garbage pickup route. Clothes left by the trash can was a common practice, and the city management told the sanitation workers that they could pick up anything left within 5 feet of the trash can. So who was this guy, Alexander Evans? He was called preacher by his co-workers. He developed the habit of engaging his colleagues in morning prayer each day before work began, which replaced the workers' gambling session. Evans had another habit of picking up discarded items and refurbishing them to give to people in need. And this whole habit was the subject of a story in the Rocky Mount paper just 8 months prior to the sanitation strike. After receiving the June complaint, the city officials suspended Evans for 2 days.
Final series in our local panel series, which covered.
They suspended Evans for 2 days, and police filed a charge of misdemeanor larceny against him. One of the striking sanitation workers summed up their position this way: if I go out there tomorrow and somebody says I stole something, you all aren't even gonna give me a chance to say anything. You all are going to take their word for it. I can't work like that. We're going to stand with Mr. Evans until he gets his stuff straight, end quote. A district judge on August 10th found Evans guilty of larceny and sentenced him to 181 days in jail, suspended for 2 years upon payment of a $100 fine and 2 years good behavior. The sanitation workers stood fast in their campaign on behalf of Evans from July 10th to September 25th, including 17 days on strike until they won Evans' reinstatement and exoneration. Reverend Thomas Walker, who happens to be my pastor, headed up an organization called the Concerned Citizens Association, which spearheaded community support for the striking workers and came to the sanitation site when the workers met with management. Under the CCA's leadership, area churches also fundraised and solicited donations to benefit the strikers. When the strikers while the strikers began a daily picket of City Hall, the CCA announced plans for a major march in Rocky Mount on August 20th. Over 1,000 supporters marched 2.5 miles during this rally, at which Reverend Walker announced a boycott of downtown Rocky Mount merchants. On August 30th, the CCA met with the Rocky Mount city manager and negotiated a return to work for the strikers, and the CCA canceled the economic boycott. Now, one of the striking sanitation workers cited Miss Naomi Green as their most important ally. Miss Green was the first person to meet with the workers at the sanitation site after learning of Evans's suspension. A longtime activist, Miss Green organized a local chapter of the National Welfare Rights Organization, by which she effectively advocated for people's rights to AFDC benefits, food stamps, and housing assistance. Miss Green stuck with the workers' strike until the end. Now, in 1981, with sanitation workers' support, Miss Green waged an unsuccessful campaign to be elected to the city council. In 1983, Naomi Green served as the lead plaintiff in the voting rights lawsuit, Green versus the City of Rocky Mount. On appeal in September 25th, a Nash County Superior Court jury deliberated just 13 minutes before finding Alexander Evans not guilty of larceny. Looking toward the September Superior Court hearing, an August 30th CCA press statement addressed the larger political issues involved in the strike by stating, "We must, however, recognize the fact that the city of Rocky Mount has a system of election of officials that deem it necessary for its minority citizens to resort to the streets and news media to have their opinions heard." The workers then called for the creation of a true ward system. Now I'm at the last point I want to make for tonight. I'm going to fast forward to the present day realities in Rocky Mount. As I fast forward to 2021 and the present day realities of Rocky Mount's political landscape, let me say this to you. Today, with the support and leadership of the Black majority serving on the city council, the political and strategic investment direction of the city has changed dramatically. The city council now has under consideration a robust 14-point affordable housing agenda, which is responsive to the needs and interests of the city's low-income, racially segregated, and disinvested neighborhoods. The city's affordable housing agenda includes continued pursuit of a general obligation bond referendum to generate increased funding, perhaps in the range of $26 to $50 million, to further finance affordable housing improvements. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this epic story for us in Rocky Mount about the 1978 sanitation workers strike. Over to you, Angela.
Thanks, Sue. And I put in the chat that you, in your modesty, did not offer the fact that you were the lead counsel in that lawsuit in Rocky Mount that made the difference for all of us and launched, myself included, many of us into the careers as elected officials, for which prior to that time we would have had no, real good opportunity. So thank you for your vision and hard work. I want to pick up and add 5 themes or implications for redistricting at the local level, redistricting and policy change at the local level, especially in communities that are predominantly or majority Black communities, or for representatives from majority Black districts, or for communities that have significant Black or Black, Asian, Latina coalition populations. These are some 5 things I wanted to point out, and they may be obvious to you, but I think it's worth emphasizing them. And I'll connect it to the Rocky Mount story. The first theme is pay attention to the lines. The second theme is historical packing can still be an issue even when we as Black people draw the lines. The third theme is it's important to advocate for our Black elected officials and other allies and other officials who are allies to be informed about fair redistricting and updated on all the latest issues and strategies. The fourth theme is that it's important to look at the overlay and overlap of redistricting in a comprehensive way. And I'll talk more about that across all the boards and commissions that are redistricting in your community. And the fifth theme is one that we have already been emphasizing, the importance of establishing a local working group who will in particular meet with the local elected officials who are allies on all the various boards that are redistricting, from the ones we are in charge of to the ones that we are in the minority on, both of those, and developing a plan and a strategy and a clearinghouse where community input and informed advocacy can happen. So I'm gonna start with that first theme, pay attention to the lines, both the current lines you have and any proposed lines. And why do I say that? The lines can affect power, resources, communities of interest, and even who the candidates are. Do not just rely on statistical charts and about the redistricting. Know where it is on the ground and what difference it makes. And the reason, one of my best examples for that is my own experience. It took us 20 years after the lawsuit that Sue brought in 1983 to redistrict 3 redistrictings before we got fair districts that allowed us to elect a majority Black city council in Rocky Mount with 57 some percent of the population, now about 60%. And some of that was we were not focused enough on where the lines were. It wasn't until we were working on redistricting in that 2000, after that 2000 census, that I realized that the line in my neighborhood for the district in my neighborhood ran right in front of my house. So it split our neighborhood and cut me off from my neighborhood, and those along my street and behind me that were in our neighborhood cut us off. I don't know specifically the exact history of that, but I know for many years my father had run 3 times and never been successful. I don't know if that was a legacy line from back at that time or what, but it meant, and even though by dividing me out, I was in another majority Black district, it was a district that was predominated by other neighborhoods than my own, who also had significant needs and underdevelopment. So it meant for years, our neighborhood had gone without any new housing initiatives, any sidewalk improvements, park improvements, community code enforcement initiatives that we needed. And often people ran in that neighborhood, in our neighborhood, but because some of us couldn't support them, they had trouble winning. And that was in what was then called the swing district. So one of the things we paid attention to and organized the neighborhood around in that effort in 2000, after the 2000 census from my neighborhood, was that we wanted the neighborhood together, and that we needed the neighborhood together because of the underdevelopment that we had been experiencing. And that was critical to getting that 4th district a majority Black or majority Black district. And I say all that to say that after that, for 2 elections after that, candidates who ran, 2 of them in each of those elections were from in the ward that now combines our neighborhood, were from the area that had been drawn out. So that goes to show that they were drawing out parts of the community where there would have been people willing to be active as candidates had they been included with their neighborhood in the district. So it's important, and we could have easily missed that point if we had just focused on numbers and percentages. So I learned an important lesson that the lines are everything. Pay attention to them and make sure when you're advocating for districts, you're looking at communities of interest. You're also looking at where are your candidates going to come from? Do you have a pipeline of candidates in these districts? And are you leaving out any areas that could help the pipeline for representation, particularly in any underserved areas? So that first theme I want to mention is pay attention to the lines. And that means we will need help with demographers and some of the projects that the organizations involved here are engaged in to get us demographers in the community who can help us look at these lines. Second point, historical packing can still be an issue even when we draw the lines, because historically we have relied on these high percentage Black districts to safely elect many of our Black elected officials. And sometimes the Black elected officials can resist reducing those high percentages when that's what's needed to create fairer districts across the whole town or county or school board district, whatever the case may be, that will allow us to elect candidates of our choice. And it also is the fact that some of these it won't be the easy cakewalk. Black districts, we cannot continue to rely on majority Black districts or majority people of color districts to be this cakewalk for us to get elected, that we're gonna have to organize, we're gonna have to work, they're gonna be competitive, and that's a part of the process. And we also need people of color in surrounding districts to enrich those districts and to also create the possibility for good candidates in those districts as well. And so, for example, the only way we were able to get that 4th majority Black district, I'm being attacked by I'm having pet problems like Aaron. I'm being attacked by my cat who is saying, talk to me and not about redistricting. Okay. So the only way we were able to get that 4th Black district is that a couple of our other Black elected officials had to take significant reductions and lead the way for significant reductions in those districts to give us a fourth district that had also a reasonable chance to elect a candidate of our choice. And we are paying for that now because all of these elections we are now running since that time are much more competitive, even with Black candidates running against each other, et cetera, and a cross race. And that will and may be continuing to be the case. And yet we have to ask our elected officials to step up to the plate on that. And even on boards where we don't have a Black majority and can't get one, we can get better districts if we can convince some of our Black elected officials to not sit back and take these packed districts that whites will gladly give them because it makes the surrounding districts more conservative. So it's something we have to figure out a way to talk about and make sure we're on the same page with our electeds and our allies, both Black and white allies and other people of color. The third theme is where we have majority Black, Indigenous, Asian, or Latinx board and commissions. We need to advocate for those electeds to be informed about fair redistricting and the impact on policy and communities of interest, small and large town interests, and the latest legal updates. And frankly, what are the right things to say and the wrong things to say? Because we also, as we're empowering ourselves this cycle, we don't want to be the one sued because of saying something that was would create challenge just by not knowing, what are the legitimate interests we can raise and what are the things to stay away from as public officials and as community leaders when we go up to advocate. It will be helpful to be educated and channeled and know where the boundaries are of things that could create problems for us should we need to litigate, or should others be litigating against us, which could also be happening in this environment. The fourth theme is it's important to look at the overlay and overlap of redistricting in a comprehensive way. And we're going to try this more in Rocky Mount this cycle, because in the past, you heard me talk about we focused on the city council. There are times we focus on the school board. And often this has been when we've had elected officials in leadership or in a key position that gave us an inroad into those boards. But we are now going to try to look at the overlay of all the boards in Rocky Mount. We have the two county, we are unusual in that we're split between two counties. So we have two county commissioners. And we in our town, we'll have two or more different county commissioner districts. Several county commissioner districts from each board will be in the city or encompass part of the city. We have two school boards. The same would be true for the school boards, as well as the city town councils in Rocky Mount and Tarboro. So we have multiple boards where redistricting will happen, and we're going to try to look at them if we are able and can, and the community organizing gods will work in our favor. We're going to try to look at those more holistically as best we can and with resources. And we encourage other communities to do the same as best you can. Now, if you have limited resources, you have to pick your targets, your key targets, and go for those. But these districts will affect school policy, how we influence school policy, housing, community development, jobs, streets, sidewalks, policing, parks and rec, healthcare, mental health care, jails and prisons, law enforcement, government employment, and chronic and continuing underdevelopment in our communities and our region. So we can look at a lot of policy influence by looking at the overlay and overlap of these redistrictings and the lines of these districts. And my fifth theme is consider establishing a local working group, which we've already been talking about. And I think the local working group will need to meet with some elected officials who are allies from all of the boards involved in redistricting to start discussing redistricting plans, to maybe do some educational sessions like we're doing here together, to take this to the local level to get on the same page about what our focus needs to be with redistricting, how we can be effective, and what strategies we can use for the overlapping boards and districts that we will be involved in. And this is delicate because it also involves, redistricting is at its heart political. And so it will involve and it will highlight and put on the table the political differences that are happening in all our communities. I would argue it's worth taking that on or using redistricting as a unifying force, at least to come together and look at what's the best situation we can create in our communities. And so I will, and the other thing I would add about that is we have to convince some of our elected officials, Black elected officials and our allies, to feel comfortable about educating the community, because in many instances, as an elected official, we've seen redistricting. You know, I believe I fought against this tendency, but I have been a part of redistricting where the elected officials see it as their thing. It's done mostly behind closed doors. We get opportunities for input at a certain point, but the preliminary work is done without us. And I think that's something we have to convince some of our elected officials to let us in sooner and earlier. And we have to insist on that. And we can now, with the help of the Alliance and other members of this coalition, we can come in with resources. And not just come in with our hands out and wanting to use their resources. We can come in with resources that can help them. I think that's for lack of a better way to describe it. So I'll stop there and hope maybe you have some questions or comments. And I see in the chat somebody said, to what extent are our city council reps charged with taking the lead on some of those redistricting committees? I think where you have elected officials, and we do have that will take the lead on the community-based effort or be a part of it, I think that's personally, that's an advantage. And I think in our community, we have some electeds who will be helping to take a lead, which makes your access easier across the elected and the community. That's one option. So that would be one way I would answer that question. And if you have elected officials you trust or who have the time or the temperament to do that community bridging, I'd say that's a good idea.
Well, definitely. I want to thank all three of our amazing panelists today. And thank you, Dr. Powell, for pitching that first question, because we are opening it up to all of our attendees. No, that's okay. No, you were great. Thank you. You were the icebreaker. I was going to do an icebreaker question, but Dr. Powell has done an icebreaker question. So for those of you who are interested in how this can work in your community, I know I do have a question. Maybe I will do another icebreaker question for the three panelists. I will say, I guess like on the local level, it seems like this sanitation worker strike was the catalyst for organizing the community. So there was this local issue that seemed to outrage, the majority of the Black residents. And from that, you were able to organize, and that was the catalyst to even, do further voting rights work. So what advice would you give to someone on the call today who may be wondering about, like, how can they begin the process of organizing the community around an issue that will then also lead to this redistricting and creating fair maps? And anyone on the panel, feel free to answer.
I'll say something first, just about this issue in Raleigh. I just saw Wanda's post in chat, and y'all just pray for us in the city. We do have Jessica. I think I saw Jessica on this call, so I don't know if there is actually a specific role that I think they should obviously take a role in helping the community to understand the issue. I also think, though, that there are some community organizations that should be working together to raise up housing issues, particularly in Raleigh, because that crisis is real serious. And there's also a campaign to build a living wage. And so that housing and that wage campaign, I think, could be ways that we could organize a coalition of groups to speak to that, and also understand how redistricting plays in us continuing to be challenged getting the representation we deserve in our city.
I agree with Erin on this question about housing. Housing affordability is an issue across the board, and also maintaining a stable housing environment with these evictions hanging in the wind right now. I think in our community there has been a history of struggle, and that if you don't know it, let me just say outright, there's also a history of fierce opposition to the political advancement of Blacks. There's anything that we go for, we have to struggle for, because the other side does not give it up for nothing. So there's a history of struggle, and that was part of the story of this sanitation worker strike. But I think that affordable housing is one of the touchstone issue of our time right now, and it manifests itself in different ways in different communities. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to reserve space for our attendees. Anyone? Oh, Angela, were you going to follow up? Okay.
I was just going to say one other point. I think that it's always important to organize around some kind of policy, what the current policy issues are. Redistricting really has no meaning aside from what it can bring, what the power of it can bring back to the community in the true spirit of it. I mean, that's the whole one person, one vote. That's the whole purpose of the voting, the constitutional right itself. So I think it's always helpful, and whether the issue generates it or you use issues to help educate about it, I think both are really would be helpful. And I finally wanted to mention for us another example is the Republican leadership in Nash County has been pushing for the demerger of our Nash, what used to be called the Nash Rocky Mount school system, now called the Nash Rocky Mount school system, the Nash County school system, that includes citizens in Rocky Mount from both counties, Nash and Edgecombe counties. And the story of that is pretty complicated, but they've set in place some dynamics that could ultimately lead to the demerger of the school system, which is going to be very important, because if once it demerges, there are new districts that are going to have to be drawn, or they may try to piggyback the county commissioner districts onto the school districts, since those geographically then districts will be the same. And so ever the more reason that this new round of redistricting in both counties and how Rocky Mount is represented in that is going to be really important to our having a say in what happens on that issue, because the Rocky Mount citizens will be primarily affected, even though ultimately all the citizens in both counties will be affected if we demerge those systems to go back to where we were before the 80s when they were consolidated. So just an example of how far afield we can go if we don't pay attention to the lines and what redistricting will bring.
Any other questions?
I have a question. May I ask a question?
Yes.
On the panel, I know. I was wondering if Angela Bryant would speak about preemption maybe too a little bit, because I feel like because of the way the lines are drawn, the legislature itself is the districts there are not fair, and it enables them to then crush a lot of local policies without, You know what I mean? So we increase minimum wage in this city after a strong fight, but then yes, I was wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about the importance of that issue, because I feel like we don't really discuss it. And I feel like it's one of the core things. If we could attack it, it would help us break free other things. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
The example I just mentioned, and you probably know that, I hope I'm unmuted now. The example I just mentioned is an example of that preemption. The majority of the people of both races in the city of Rocky Mount did not want any change in the school system. But the Nash County commissioners felt like they didn't have the control they wanted, and they saw particularly Blacks who they associated with representing the people on the Edgecombe side of Rocky Mount, which is they're representing Nash and Edgecombe people, but which they saw them as pushing them, as being a part of this board that is pushing them on funding. I'm getting an unstable. I'm gonna do my on funding. So and the Republicans then got a bill pushed through the legislature over our objection and over the objection of most of the local leaders in the community to set up this scenario to force, under certain circumstances, Edgecombe County doesn't pay certain monies on capital expenditures and et cetera, and they eliminated the city of Rocky Mount from participating in the school funding, which it had done ever since the school districts had merged. They set it up to make it harder for Edgecombe County to comply, and if they don't, it triggers this demerger process, or if they decide not to, it triggers this demerger process. So that's an example of preemption. It happened on around the minimum wage, around the bathroom bill, around annexations, and there have been other areas around which they have passed laws that preempted local action, or they will pass local bills that the governor cannot veto against the will of the majority of the people in the local community. So they've gone into, I think, Guilford and several other places and changed the districts, created at-large districts, or created partisan elections in the school board, or they've done lots of preemptive legislation that were opposed by people in the local communities, and that's because of the extreme gerrymandering that gave them, at least initially, a veto-proof majority. Now, it took us 10 years and I don't know how many lawsuits to get to where we are now, which is only enough to get a veto, not enough still to get a majority. So if we need to work hard this time up front and not count on a legal strategy, lawsuits to save us, as they have done before. And we see what's happening at the federal level. This is an all-out war for power and control at multiple levels. And even if we do everything we can do, we still may not have a complete victory, but I think we'll be better off than if we just do not, let them roll over us and then try to respond, be reactive. We have to be proactive. Yeah. Is that helpful, Aaron?
Exactly. Yeah, it was very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, ladies, so much. At this point, we're not done. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Reggie Weaver, at this time, because shortly we will go into breakout rooms where you would get an opportunity to take a deeper dive in this discussion and hopefully come out with some solutions for your own communities. Mm-hmm. Reggie? Let's see.
So as Yolanda has said, again, want to thank our panelists, and we're actually, what we're now going to do before we go into breakout rooms, we're going to open this for a time of Q&A from the actual participants on the call. We thank you all for both your participation in the call and for listening. And we are sure that there are questions that have come up for you that are more specific maybe to your context. So we want to give you some time to ask questions of our panelists. We're going to allow about 10 minutes for that. And we don't have to take that whole time, but just so you know, we have up to 10 minutes for Q&A from the participants. And then we will shift into small groups where you can begin to think about what are maybe some local issues for you that you begin to organize around, and how do you connect that to redistricting. So the way we're going to ask you to do this for this time is to type your question in the chat. And Yolanda and/or I will read those aloud to our panelists. And while you all are thinking, I'm going to name, because part of the theme, part of the reason we structured it this way is we are grateful for everyone that's been a panelist, but we wanted kind of a state level perspective. Then we also wanted, in some ways, a very hyper local focus, because especially when you're talking about redistricting, I think it's, as you've heard today, tonight, it's often hard to help people understand why you should even pay attention to it, and to help people understand and connect that to issues that are important to them. It's in some ways easier to mobilize people around that, and then you can go a little bit deeper in the conversation. And so again, right now, one thing that's going on in North Carolina, we are still, as a state, wrestling with what has happened to Brother Andrew Brown. And there are lots of people who are asking the question, why can't we see this video footage? I live in Guilford County. I live in Greensboro. The body cam footage that makes that, or the body cam law that is making it impossible for us in public to see it right now, comes out of this county in 2016. It started as a very preemptive move, as former Senator Bryant said earlier. It was a preemptive move on our city council and county commissioner level that became a state policy. And so the issue, and it became state law in part because of the way our districts are drawn at the state level. That's not the whole story. That's not the only issue, but a factor in why that becomes law is because of the way these districts are drawn. You've got people in power who have an interest or a vested interest in a lack of transparency in this regard. And when you've got districts that are drawn in a way that protects them, it becomes difficult to change those laws. And so I'm just giving that as a concrete example at a state level. That's also become a national story. But all of us probably have experienced more local issues as well, as we've heard from the example of Rocky Mount. So anyway, just kind of giving that example while you all are thinking. So there's a question from, I'm going to read first the question from Dr. Powell. So she states, my question would be, how do you start the conversation in really small rural areas and enclaves, not cities with a history of activism? Do we look to the quote unquote hub, or municipalities that draw others, or what? And so there's a specific reference in parentheses to Angela's 5th point. So this question is more about organizing rural areas as opposed to maybe larger urban areas that have a history of broad activism.
I would say, oh, I didn't know I was not muted. I'm sorry. I hope I wasn't creating noise because I was typing in the chat. I apologize. If y'all could hear me, hear that. I would say that in the smaller town, rural communities, I think we have to look at the redistricting they will be focused on is congressional and legislative in most instances. And I think that's definitely a lot to say grace over. And it will mean us getting the legislators and their staffs and the congressional staffs and I guess and some of our groups invested in helping to go in and I think local elected officials should be invested in that redistricting, because as a local elected official in those smaller communities, your ability to get things, deliver things for that community is going to depend on the state and federal officials in place and the impact you can have. So I think you can still use the same, I just put the 5 points in the chat, Yolanda asked me. So I think you can still use that strategy. You will be working with local officials, not about their own districts, but to help get them involved in advocating with the state and federal office, people to work on redistricting and to have us included sooner rather than later. And that's going to be pushing on your legislators and your congressional folks.
Thank you. Because I mean, I know that in some of the areas, like I see Commissioner Campbell is falling right in line. There isn't that history of activism, or if there was one, that generation of civil rights activists have died. So, being a little creative and what did you say, Angela? A lot of grace over it. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah, pray for the organizing gods. I was see something about Robeson County, and I think it would be important to start with the local elected officials and and legislator, whoever would be an ally around the issues you're concerned about, to start there with some advice from folks, from some of the experts, with the Alliance and Southern Coalition and Blueprint and Democracy NC, whatever the groups are that of the ACLU, whoever puts themselves out there as resources, to get a person and start working now to figure out what angles you need to pursue to have a voice on those issues.
For those on the call, Angela was just responding to the question in the chat, again, that says Robeson County. And so the question was, what steps do we need to take to keep the lines from splitting heavily populated areas of us into native represented districts? So she was just responding to that. There's also a question in the chat from Jennifer Bremer. And it's not directed to anyone in particular. So again, any of our panelists who would like to answer, could you talk more about the process of engaging local people in redistricting? What has worked to get them involved in terms of tactics and messaging? Who have been the trusted intermediaries? And I think in some ways that's related to the Robeson County question, but any insights you have on that?
I can say one of the things that I've seen successful is doing community education and training sessions. I think that there's some called the Crowd Academy, things like this that explain the basics to the core. I think what Sister Angela Bryant said about identifying your core is also critical. People in neighborhood associations or I've sent out a list to find, to people I know that says, this is the thing I'm interested in. Anybody interested? We'd like to have dinner on X day. And then really like get together and build out, from there, about with a core of people that you can study and sort of grow their capacity, not only really to take on this issue, but all the other issues that are plaguing our communities, to build really strong local leadership around that. I think is really important, and try to do that a lot with Fertile Ground and with our owners, to do education so people can build the skills to take on whatever they want to take on. But I think that the resources that were named around the Southern Coalition, the stuff that I send, hopefully that Reggie can send out to people. There's a lot of resources out there that people could use. There's some videos too, and there was a note about messaging, and I'll just name that one. And there's a presentation in here that people can read at their leisure that talks about how the language of redistricting and gerrymandering for people is turns them off a little. It feels negative to them. And so it offers other language and then other memes and things around building fair districts. And it says to focus on things that are aspirational and around the direct impact of redistricting, and not necessarily just on the representation aspect of it. So I thought that was very interesting about what is drawing people into engaging in redistricting across the country, according to the research. Well, some research, let's just say that.
And I would also say that the education sessions are helpful, because as a former elected official, once I see these education sessions happening in the community, then I'm gonna get off the stick and get involved, because I don't want the community to get out in front of me, you know, as the elected. I'm gonna want to know what's going on. I'm gonna want to know the benefit of the dialogue. So I think that that's also a way to draw in your electeds and other community leaders who might, for some reason, sit on the sideline and wait to be contacted, you know, because they have the network or something. Might get them more actively involved. And in any event, to the extent you spend time educating community members, when there's time to go to a meeting or speak at a hearing or whatever, you're not starting from scratch. You got people who know the language and some of the issues and can be prepped and ready to go. Because you're gonna have to deliver in that. We're gonna have to deliver at multiple levels in that way. And in my small town, we got our district because the neighborhood folks went up to the city council and said, you know, our neighborhood has not been treated fairly. You know, somebody's got to be ready, understand that, and be ready to go talk about it.
Yeah, that's so true, Angela. I just want to say real quickly, in my support of work in Rocky Mount, I remember when the topic gentrification came up, you know, people in Rocky Mount was like, what? Gentrification in Rocky Mount? What are you talking about? This ain't Raleigh. This isn't Durham. But when the people in the community academy, like you said, began raising that issue, I saw elected officials begin to run on that. They adopted the people's platform, because again, like you said, didn't want to seem as if they were isolated from it or behind it. And then they were able to really run on the people's platform. But there's another question in the chat, Reggie, that I was gonna raise here. It looks like we've answered Councilwoman Campbell's question, correct? I think so. You indicated. Angus Thompson, did we answer your question, Councilwoman Campbell? Oh, we didn't? Okay. She stated, what steps do we need to take to keep the lines from splitting heavy populated areas of us into Native represented districts? I think that's what it's saying.
I'm sorry, you did answer that. That question
Okay.
was answered.
Okay,
Yes,
because I thought it was kind of like a combination response that Angela gave. Okay.
I was shaking my head to Angus.
Oh, to Angus. Okay. I was looking at you, Dr. Powell.
I know. I was messing you up. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It was Angus.
Okay, well, Angus asked, discuss any tension between public housing advocates and I guess private ownership housing advocates in Rocky Mount's affordable housing policy. Did I phrase that correctly, Angus?
Did I phrase it correctly?
You want to go ahead and ask
Angela? I mean, are there any tensions between the two advocates for public housing?
That's a Sue Perry question.
The first thing I want to make sure that y'all understand is that this isn't a Raleigh where we have mega developers like the Kane Company and some of those supercharged developers that basically have control of the agenda. Our work started to make it an issue, to make housing, affordable housing and gentrification an issue, and the conversation grew. One thing that we haven't said enough about, I don't think, is the use of voice in public spaces to amplify concerns. And in a small town, it's not like Raleigh. You don't have to work as hard to get in the paper, or even possibly get on the front page of the paper. And so we have worked very hard to have ordinary people speak in the public square and express their concerns, either in the open mic portion of a meeting or as part of a public hearing or something like that. Now, we're not so naive to think that it's that this lack of mega developers is going to go on forever, because the area is drawing a lot of attention in terms of its competitiveness in housing costs. And I think that there's going to be a tsunami of investors around here before it's all over. But the other thing about Black elected officials, they like to listen to community voices because that's who elects them. And they are attentive to the things that the people say from their districts. And then, of course, we work with attorneys. So not only do we say it, we put it in writing, and we participate in ways in which you can leverage citizen participation because of certain statutory requirements and certain housing planning schemes. So we haven't had to fight the kind of developers that you have in Raleigh and some of the other bigger cities, but it's coming. Do you want to say anything about that, Yolanda?
You mean to the original question, or to what you just stated about, yeah, the development is coming. So we believe that some of the developers are secretly in Rocky Mount, right? We don't know all the players that are moving yet, but as Sue alluded in her presentation, the assistant city, well, not the assistant city manager, the city manager just released a very progressive agenda around affordable housing. Like Sue stated, a 15-point agenda of different tools to use to preserve affordable housing. And all of this, just to relate it back to the fight around redistricting at the local level, all of this is possible because of the fight that happened. And I guess encourage those of you, especially in Raleigh, my friends in Raleigh, who are just like, it just seems so hopeless right now. I mean, this did not happen overnight, right, Sue? It took what, 30-something years?
Yeah, it was a long-term agenda, and you got to go for the long ball, and you got to play it out, game it out. And different people come into the picture and take over the leadership at certain points along the way. It's not just one person or one group that handles the strategy over the decades that this took. People like Angela and some of the other Black elected officials, they stepped to the fore after, as the years played themselves out, and they began to control the agenda. But I wonder, do we put enough emphasis on the long-term strategies? It's hard to do.
Yeah, it's like there's a fire around every corner. Like you're focused on one thing and something else happens, and then you get divert. And they see that in Raleigh and other places too. But it looks like my friend Veronica from Winston-Salem, Miss Veronica Byton has a question in the chat. Are there any organized or concerted efforts to prepare citizens of townships and cities to engage in determining how the American Rescue Plan Act funds will be utilized? And two, are there any examples of organized efforts with community inclusion? And I guess, Sue, you could speak to this because I know your organized group in Rocky Mount, educating them on the American Rescue Plan Act is important because that act includes important utility. I mean, the municipalities like Rocky Mount is an entitlement jurisdiction, so they will get direct funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. So and they have discretion to use that for housing, utility, and rent assistance. But would you like to speak about that, Erin, Angela, Sue? Go.
On this question of community inclusion, the Black majority on the city council has put up front and center stage the notion of equity and inclusion, because the disparities in economic investment were so pronounced in the town. They almost had to take a position on that. And so one of the things that was one of the fiercest, most recent fiercest battles was the notion of investing $48 million in a downtown event center that was on the Black side of town. And that was a throwdown with all kinds of schemes and organizing in the other side of town to try to stop that, because that changed the investment pattern and opened the door to the transformation of these neighborhoods that have been deprived of investment for decades. It's very obvious in our town that the investment has only been channeled to one side of town. And now with this breaking down of the barrier of investing on the Black side of town, that is a principle that we fight for, equitable development. And I think it's an important principle to think about in this context of redistricting, because these patterns of disinvestment are everywhere in all of these jurisdictions. And it may be a way to open up the conversation and engage folks.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm being told by Reggie that our time is up for this broader Q&A, and we're going to head into